And welcome into another post-podcast edition of Spits and Suds. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan. The Stars, for the third straight game, beat a Central Division foe, this time in the Beehive State for the first time, beating Utah by the score of 2-1. Hello, everyone. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan, and I am joined by our good friend, the birthday boy this week, David Castillo of D Magazine, and also of his Substack, which, David, remind me, I'm drawing a blank, birthday boy. Star Stack.
I was going to say, I was drawing a blank myself because I'm like, how old am I? Like, I'm either going to be 44 or 45. And I really wasn't sure. In fact, I'm still not sure. Let me look at my driver's license real quick. So this will make for scintillating. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Just like I appreciated tonight's win. There's not a whole lot to say other than, man, I thought Utah is fast.
Yes.
And we all know Utah is truly your favorite team. And we all know Michael Kessering is truly your favorite defenseman. So I wanted to really give you the floor here. You know, you get to gush about Utah and how really Dallas didn't deserve to win. Utah looked faster, and they're going to make the playoffs.
They did lose. They did lose two of their top defensemen. I will just say this: heaven forbid you make a prediction of another team in the Central Division that they might do something special, because now all of a sudden I'm labeled as a Utah fan of all things. Oh man, I just think they're an up and coming program. So I think they're if you watch the game tonight, you can see why. You can see why they went into Vegas and dominated, but you can also see why the Stars won by the score of 2-1. All right, so much to talk about tonight. And before we get too far into this, I want to get your thoughts, David, because this is the first time we're seeing the Delta, so to speak, on TV. What it was like, and it really did remind me of when the New York Islanders played in Brooklyn, as far as the stands kind of being off from a regular arena and how dark it was on television. So I wanted to get your thoughts. I just thought it was interesting. I mean, the AAC is so bright. I thought tonight's broadcast was a little bit on the dark side, and it kind of made me at times find it a little bit tough to read numbers.
The only thing missing was the white SUV in the corner of the ice.
Didn't it look like Brooklyn? Yes. It did really look like the Barclays Center.
Yeah, no, it definitely. I mean, I'm somebody that just really, when it comes to all the trimmings of hockey, how it's presented, traditional commentary, the arenas themselves, I'm not paying attention to the ammonia systems that refrigerate the ice or anything like that, and so. Even I could kind of notice that, but it's also these are the things that make you a true hockey nerd, Gavin. I mean, yes. I don't care, and that's why I'm not the hockey nerd that I think I am, and I'm almost a little jealous.
Yeah, I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." I also saw how many Stars fans were in the barn, and kudos to Stars fans for traveling. That's impressive. But you know what? They are in a full-size arena, and they have really good ownership, and good to see Post Malone in the crowd. So
come on,
I know.
I mean, it was good to see Post Malone in Wrath of Man with Jason Statham. That was good to see. Here, I don't need to see celebrities in the crowd. But I'm a terrible person that way. I don't want to see it, but I get it, Gavin. I get it.
How do you root for your North Texas team when you're next to the owner of the host team, Utah? That's interesting. So, all right, let's
real quick. And I do miss Mullet Arena.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, it wasn't great for NHL, but it's that was an interesting situation, but actually pretty special at times. It reminded me of up north Kraft when they do Hockeyville. on Hockey Night in Canada, and NHL teams go into these small arenas and play a preseason game. I love it. Absolutely love it. You're right. I am a hockey nerd. You are right, David Castillo. I am a self-admitted hockey nerd. All right. Casey DeSmith, we have to start there. Looked tremendous. Big bounce back after a couple of rough starts. In fact, you look at the Stars goaltending the last 2 games. Boy, just giving up just one yesterday against Winnipeg and then one today against Utah. I mean, back-to-backs are tough, especially when the second game you have to fly on the road. But just a real impressive showing by Ottinger yesterday, and then DeSmith. I mean, I thought he played terrific tonight. I didn't feel at times like he got the best of help. A lot of high-quality opportunities for Utah, but DeSmith shut him down.
Well, I think the Colorado, my goodness, the Carolina game, I think created a real kind of anchor and effect for like some fans that just forgot that, like he started the year solid. And even though he's a backup goaltender that's, never gonna, he's never gonna give you, performances like this consistently. Otherwise he wouldn't be a backup. However, he played fantastic. I thought early on, actually, Utah was kind of squandering some of their chances, kind of more than anything. But once like sort of they settled into a groove, and boy, was there a groove! Like there was a real pace to this game, which I really loved, in part because of Utah's speed. But once that happened, like you could tell, like DeSmith was really dialed in, and made some tough saves. So yeah, total credit to him, and it's again a reminder that like DeSmith will lay an egg because that's what backups do. But for the most part, Dallas's goaltending has been fine.
Yeah. Point number 2, Evgeni Dadonov with the power play goal, his 7th goal of the season. David, you can put this guy on the first line. You can put him on the 4th line. It really doesn't matter. He just is that Swiss Army knife. And actually, what I'm kind of impressed by is I like his work in the defensive zone as well. I think he's become better as that, as an aged KG veteran. But he's one of those guys that, we focus on the big players for the Stars, but it just seems like every single night Dadonov comes to play.
I've always had a soft spot for Dadonov going back to his days in Florida because he's one of those players who kind of defies convention and sort of is not like the stereotype that you think he is. You think, oh, Dadonov, he seems like a skilled player, a skilled Russian player. He's primarily offensive, right? But no, he's always had a real kind of like grinders kind of mindset, but with a real kind of like playmaker's flourish and really a lot of those skills. But yet he leverages his speed to kind of defensive effect and really is kind of like a nice 5 tools kind of forward. And I think it's all the more impressive given his age. I mean, this is a guy that, by all means, by all accounts, should absolutely be, he should be on the decline, as we've seen with some other players on the roster. And no, he still puts in the work as if he's 25 years old or however old he was when he first came to the league. Right, he was like an older kind of prospect when he first, I think, when he began his career at Florida. But I do not and will not forget when Dadonov played with Barkov. I thought that was a phenomenal line, and I think that was the year when Barkov almost broke 100 points. I think Barkov scored like 96. The year he was with Dadonov, which I think says a lot about sort of, just kind of his raw skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you look at the contract value, $2.25 million. That's just really, really a great signing by Jim Nill. And then you look at the trade that he made for Denis Gurianov, straight up, and it's just wonderful. And he's also one of those players, David, that he's been on a lot of teams, but no one really can give a reason why he's been well traveled. Kind of like Brendan Cooks of the Dallas Cowboys, who's been on a lot of teams, and then you dig into it and say, okay, what's going on behind the scenes? And then everyone's like, no one really can give an answer. And it's fascinating. And Dadonov's kind of the same way.
Well, that I think that happens with players that kind of because they're not, because like sort of their profile is not always obvious. Like, oh, here's a big bruising power forward, or here's a big shutdown defenseman, or here's a small skilled forward. Because that profile is not obvious, I think that's why you like. I think about somebody like Anthony Duclair, right? Bounce around a lot of teams, super skilled. Is there a real good reason for why he's? No, there's really not. Like, there's no, there's nothing like personal that he. It's just, it's, I think one of those. I think it's the footprint of a, what I would call the peculiar player, right? The player that kind of defies stereotype. And so, yeah, I don't think the NHL has ever been particularly good with evaluating quote unquote peculiar players. And Dadonov is a great peculiar player.
Yeah, he is. The other guy that needs to be talked about, 22 games played, 9 points. And, once again, hate to bring up contracts, but these are the kind of things that take you to the promised land. A cap hit of just 1.2 million in Sam Steele, an assist on the Jamie Benn second goal of tonight.
I mean, one of the things that's been really, and I hate to kind of like transition into criticism, because we want to shower the Stars with nothing but like praise and flowers and parades and so forth. However, man, it's unfortunate that like Maverick Bourque has kind of had a relatively like slow process in the NHL. Obviously, this is not really even a criticism. Like, this is kind of something that I think Bourque will kind of develop in time. But the fact that he hasn't been able to do that also kind of means that, well, we don't have, for example, a fourth line of, say, Steele, Blackwell, and Dadonov, which I think would be phenomenal. And so, yeah, it's good to see these fourth. As much as I sort of dislike the kind of idea about sort of putting fourth liners on the power play, that's kind of been like going around. There's also no denying that Dallas, unlike most teams, has fourth liners that they can play up the lineup, down the lineup, and in a lot of situations. I mean, so yeah, great to see Steele. I don't know how many points he has on the season, but great work from Sam Steele, who's been really good for Dallas. And yeah, just don't have anything sort of really to add to that. Dallas, this is one of Dallas's true strengths, just that offensive depth.
9 points.
Okay.
2 goals, 7 assists. But once again, kind of a Swiss Army knife where he can move up and down the lineup. And then when you look as like a fourth line player, if he is a fourth line player, but you did mention Maverick Bourque, and that led me to my next point. At this juncture, Sean and I have talked on Spits and Suds about the possibility on one of these weekend AHL series about sending Maverick Bourque down to try to, boost kind of the confidence and get some major minutes in. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't personally see it. I think the thing with, to me, when I look at, when I consider what Bourque did in the AHL, it was just very clear that he was a level beyond those players. And so like, I just, to me, like, this would be the exact kind of move that, I think takes away from a player's confidence. And yeah, sure, like Bourque hasn't necessarily excelled in the way that people might expect. But again, we're weighing Bourque against a kind of a pattern that we're used to seeing, which is young players coming in and just blowing the doors down with Wyatt Johnston and Logan Stankoven. And so Bourque is really kind of dealing with, I think, this kind of unfair high bar that the Stars and their drafting have set. And so to me, like, I just see this as like, listen, Bourque has shown elements of effectiveness. And I think there are times when, he almost looks the part. For the most part, he hasn't. But I also don't think he's been deficient in any one area, though, either. He's not a player that's necessarily kind of taken away from his line's effectiveness. And me personally, I would absolutely keep him in there over Oscar Beck. I just think, plus, I think about like Bourque with, say, like Dadonov, if Dallas is fully healthy, with, say, like Dadonov and Steele, and I think Bourque has been good on these lower lineups. So I'm not a fan personally. I think it underscores the little things that he's done well. I do think he has been a details-oriented forward, and I don't see anything bad about it or deficient that would require him to go to the AHL, where then he'd really feel like, oh crap, I must suck, huh?
Yeah, yeah. Defensively, Esa Lindell. Just what a season he's having, David. And the worry was when Chris Tanev left his side, what Esa Lindell would we see? And I mean, I just think he's been absolutely terrific. Second part defensively. And this is going to sound weird. And I thought he had one play where the puck jumped over his stick, but we're at the point now. I don't think you can take Nils Lundkvist out of this lineup. I know
Well,
it sounds weird, but I mean, boy, I'm really enjoying Nils Lundkvist this year.
So I'm right there with you. He's played phenomenal hockey, even against the standards of their best defenders like Heiskanen, Harley, and Lindell. Like he's like, to me, Lundkvist is right up there over this last stretch. However, are you really confident that Lundkvist is going to stay in the lineup if he has, say, a bad game, or Dallas is a matchup against an opponent that they know is quote unquote nasty, and they feel like, oh well, hey, bring Dumba in, and they've already normalized scratching. We had this kind of conversation, right? Like I think last time, and I what do you think are the chances that he stays in this lineup the whole season?
If he has a tough game, I can see it. I could see the pull if he had a tough game. That said, I will give the coaching staff credit in that he wasn't or has not been the normal pull like Brendan Smith and Dumba have become. And I give credit that they kept Nils Lundkvist in that top six. That means that, to me, while they might not be completely confident in him, they are seeing enough that they're like, no, you deserve to stay in.
Well, also at the same time, it's like, well, when Lundkvist is playing like this, it's not when you have games like Lundkvist and then the game that, say, Smith and Dumba had against what was it? Was it Chicago, where they just absolutely just imploded? Then I can't. Me personally, I can't give the coaching staff too much credit to be like, oh, hey, let's play the clearly superior player right now over these guys that are struggling. But I understand what you're saying, right? Which is that it's not an easy thing to sort of tell these veterans, we're going to sit you out because you guys are kind of sucking right now. And listen, I want to see Dumba and Smith. Well, Smith was always going to be the seventh defenseman. Like I would like to see Dumba succeed. I think we were both kind of on the train of, what, man? Yeah, he's had some tough seasons, but hey, let's give him another shot. He does have a good history, and he is a player that can provide not just an element that they lack, but he's a player that can, give you like a solid shift. That really hasn't happened. So
no,
I stand corrected, but
in fact, no. And I kind of felt the same way, but one of the interesting, and I understand kind of from a coaching perspective why he would be reinserted into the lineup, in that the familiarity with his former teammates. And that can really help because you've practiced so much with them. But yeah, look at the protection on Matt Dumba. And this tells you a lot from a Stars perspective. So you had Heiskanen with 25 shifts, Lundkvist with 24, Lindell with 24, Lyubushkin with 22, Harley with 24, Matt Dumba with 19. And then you look at the time on ice. Heiskanen led the way with 24:42, followed by Lindell at 23:06, Harley at 20:53, Lyubushkin 19:05, Lundkvist up there at 17:23, Matt Dumba down to last year's kind of Lundkvist levels at times with just 12:50 of ice time on 19 shifts. So they were getting him on and off pretty quick.
Yeah, which is kind of what they need to do, right? He's a player that, like, it just seems like the speed of the game is really kind of passing him by in many ways. And I think his kind of fascination and kind of investment and sort of being really a player that he never actually was. Yes, Dumba, like, is his current incarnation is very physical, but his first like several years with Minnesota, like he was more of an offensive defenseman
Yeah.
who could give you the occasional hit, but he wasn't like the brawler that he is now. And so, like, yeah, I listen, I like seeing the hits from just kind of a bloodthirsty fan perspective, and I do enjoy that physicality, but also I want to just see Dumba like play a good shift, and I think he can be capable of that. It's just that I think we know kind of where his game is at this point, and know where he's at in the pecking order. And yes, it's good to see the coach and staff recognize that, and hopefully, regardless of who has what or whether or not it's the playoffs, we see that, well, the optimal lineup involves Lundkvist in it, whether he's got experience or not.
Yeah. Before we get to everything involved, as far as listeners' questions and opinions and everything, I wanted to get your thoughts as a guy who follows the Texas Stars pretty well. Steven Reserve with a terrific article at 100 Degree Hockey. This one was posted on the AHL.com regarding the call up Dustin Rikovian. And get your Ritzkovian, should I say. Odd spelling for the name, the former Northeastern captain. We were talking before the show. His brother is still at Northeastern, so they actually played together last year. And from what I was watching today, when I was watching some film, I saw him in the preseason. I thought he really kind of stood out a little bit in preseason, and certainly has stood out as a Texas Star. He deserved this call up, but wanted to get your thoughts on Justin Ritzkovian.
Yeah, it's by the way, like however you like sort of feel about like sounding it out, like just imagine having to write that, like, because every week I cover the Texas Stars, and his last name is just a nightmare to spell because I do not copy and paste. Like I like trying to kind of learn names as well as possible. Nobody cares about the writer's plight, however, so we can just move on. And I'll say that for me, Ritzkovian, it's funny that we were talking about Dadonov, because to me, Ritzkovian, even though he's not really like Dadonov, he does kind of remind me of who I would argue was the homeless man version of Dadonov, which was Justin Dowling, for those people that remember him. And so he has, like, Ritzkovian has this kind of sort of five tools kind of element where, he doesn't really have a lot of forward facing skills. He's not like a super gifted shooter. He's not, super fast or anything like that. But he does a lot of little things well, and he runs really good routes. I think he has like some playmaking chops as well. And by the way, he is a scrappy dude. He had a fight in the preseason, for those that remember, against St. Louis, and also had another fight in Texas. I can't remember like who it was, but he has that dog in them, as the kids say, and he's it's well deserved. Like, I don't personally think he's an NHL like quality player in terms of like having like a proper career, but he is someone that absolutely deserves it. And I think that's probably, I don't know. I think I was going to add something else, and then those brain cells just blew up.
All right. So Evan White yesterday on the program asked me, random question, why does Wyatt Johnston wear number 53? Seems so random to me. So I promised you, Evan, that I would get back to you, and did a little research. And that was the number given to Wyatt Johnston, and he liked it, and so he kept it. And that's as simple as I can get. But that's real quick, the answer you were looking for.
Real quick, on the topic of forwards and numbers, am I the only one that absolutely loathes Cole Sillinger's number 4? Forward on the Columbus Blue Jackets. I don't know why, and maybe it's just like some sort of anal retentive thing, but like, to me, those low numbers like that, those low single numbers for a forward, just don't make any sense.
Yeah. No, I agree. That is a very weird thing. I actually had to get used to that in the NFL when they allowed different numbers to all of a sudden show up in different areas, and you're like, oh wow, that's interesting, the number that they're wearing. So yeah, it is certainly an adjustment, but I agree. Let's see. Steven chimes in. He says, way too many chances for Utah, but the goalie stole the win. Yeah, I would say certainly Casey DeSmith was the top star of the night. Not going to complain, although I'm hoping they were saving energy tonight for the rest of the week. Well, if this was a prize fight, David, I have Utah winning, and it's not. Utah winnings round 1 and 3, and Dallas with a prevailing win in period number 2.
Yeah, it felt like sort of Jose Aldo versus Chad Mendez part two, which was all 5 rounds, fantastic fight. And
Quality poll.
and even though sort of that, even though this game didn't have a whole lot of goals, I thought it had like a great pace. And honestly, I think Utah had maybe the more dramatic chances, but I do think Dallas had some of the better sustained pressure in the game. And so yeah, there was a clear speed differential, but the whole like time and beat speed cliche. I thought Dallas did a pretty good job. Even if you look at their sort of compare their expected goals to one another, right? Utah had the edge 2.4 to Dallas 2.3, pretty negligible difference in terms of shot quality differential.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a great point. All right, so he finishes and saving energy tonight for the rest of the week. I mean, Wednesday is going to be a tough tilt at LA. And the Kings are actually playing some good hockey this year. And they're a team that a lot of people don't talk about. And they're a good mix of like young and old talent. Steven also adds Dadonov is one of the funniest players ever. Hockey's never normal when he's on the ice. Okay. I don't know why, but I found that very entertaining. Michael Moore, Esa, 3 minutes to end the game. Workhorse, yeah. Casey stick taps way to rebound. Tyler on IR, that's concerning. Dumba contract holding the Stars hostage. All right, so this is like bullet point from Michael Moore. So we talked about Esa Lindell and how impressive we have. Casey stick taps way to rebound. Oh, stick taps, meaning stick tap. Compliment. Yeah. Big rebound from him tonight. Tyler on IR concerning. David, I'm not concerned about Seguin because this seems to be similar to a goaltender Ottinger situation. This seems to be a workload situation where they're really managing the workload of Tyler Seguin and giving him proper rest.
Well, I mean, could be, right? I mean, we don't really know, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of one of the things that both Robert Tiffin and Sean Shapiro wrote about over the last couple of days, which was, just kind of speculating on whether or not, this is something that just kind of made sort of a sudden flare up, and that Dallas has been monitoring this, suggesting that, yeah, there could be something like something bigger in the works in terms of getting it done. Because I mean, why wouldn't you just make sure that Seguin was 100% time for the playoffs, as opposed to just trying to run him ragged during the regular season. Dallas's offense is going to be fine. Like, yes, Seguin is having a fantastic season, and as is unfortunately kind of often the case with like Seguin seasons, they always feel a little incomplete. So yeah, it would certainly suck to see him sidelined, but I'd much rather him have it taken care of, if it's something serious, and just be as close to 100% in time for the playoffs as possible, because that Seguin line with Duchesne and Marchment needs to stay together, and I would rather it stay together while Seguin missed a bunch of regular season games but feels good, as opposed to feels miserable because he just tried to play through it during the whole regular season. Again, making a lot of assumptions here, but
I agree. I mean, something's bothering him. And to answer the final question for you, Michael, 3.75 for Dumba. I guess at this point you could look at that as a tough contract, but I don't know if it's necessarily handicapping you. I think if you go around the league, you will find most teams have 1 or 2 players that probably have a contract that you wish you didn't have to carry. And that's just sports. Let's see. Jordan H. Harper hockey fan. Should we blame the slow start for the power play on the team missing Pavs? I'm going to enjoy a Frosty. I'm watching the highlights. Oh, cool. Would love to know what Frosty you're enjoying, my man. David, on these back-to-backs, and it's a Monday night, I should have cracked a Frosty, but I'm just trying to pace myself around this holiday season. But very nice win. I'm drinking some H2O tonight, just to let you know. Let's see. I don't know, power play. They got another one tonight, but at the same time, I just thought it was a good individual effort for Dadonov, waiting for the goaltender and taking advantage of that opportunity. But slow start, I don't really see Jordan the slow start. I think they're actually playing really good hockey as of late. Yeah.
Well, I
Uh,
wonder. I wonder if that wasn't a reference to slow start, like for the power play, right? I mean, it didn't really. The one thing I will say about the power play tonight is that so I wrote like a kind of like sort of a modest kind of power play analysis at the Star Stack. I think it was last week, and one of the things I did mention is that when you were looking at like some of their entries, some of their zone entries on the power play, like Dallas was really slow for whatever reason. They were like taking these long winding routes to like build speed. Whereas tonight, better entries thanks to much more direct concerted speed. Like they were really trying to get in as quick as possible, not trying to kind of make too many extra passes. And I thought that kind of made a difference. And so the power play is certainly not fixed, and we have a long way to go. But I thought there were good signs, and I think there have been good signs
yeah.
for a while.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And you're right. He was talking about the slow start of the power play. But yeah, certainly that high tip of Pavelski certainly is nice. And we all agree that Pavelski, in the playoffs was not the player we once knew. But at the same time, he was very effective as far as creating space on the power play. Not the biggest guy, but somehow knew to find those open areas. Martin Crooms across the pond in England. This has to feel good for DeSmith. He earned those 2 points when the rest of the team looked like a team on a back-to-back. Another win in the guest column for David Castillo. Ben coming up huge with the faceoff wins at the end. It's the small details. Yeah, Jamie Benn in the circle this year has been tremendous.
Yeah, I mean it's been that way for a while, and he's a player that I think is he's one of the few forwards that has kind of struggled. Well, I'm sorry, it's few, right? There's quite a few actually, but one of the kind of players that I think has struggled, but to me, like Ben's struggles have always been explainable. He's an older guy, he plays a much tougher game. Like that kind of profile doesn't tend to age well. So within that context, grading him on a curve, I think he's been okay. And so, to see him like continue to be extremely effective on the faceoff circle, which he's done for a while, is just I think another feather in the cap, and I think says a lot about kind of his dedication, his performance. He's probably not a player that I think belongs in the top power play unit, however, but I mean, I think for the most part, like he's doing what he needs to do. And I think the real question is going to be like, well, what's he going to be in time for the playoffs? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, David. Zach Bradford says, "How crazy is it that DeBoer trusts Nils over Dumba? Great to see 17 minutes out of little number 5." Um, I'll give Nils Lundkvist this. I was surprised that he chose to stay with the franchise. I was also surprised the franchise decided to keep him. Although when you look at the contract, it's a very, very fair contract for both sides. But I think that Nils Lundkvist has proven that he can play in this league, which I think is nice overall. And yeah, 17, minutes, that's terrific. So I personally, I agree with what you're saying about how surprised would you be if DeBoer pulls him at some point. I agree with you, David, but at the same time, I also say to myself, if you and I are seeing this out of Nils Lundkvist, if Zach Bradford on Twitter/X is seeing out of this Lundkvist, I think DeBoer and his coaching staff are probably seeing a lot of the same traits.
Yeah, and I'm rooting for the guy, and I don't want to put a damper on anything, because there's really there's certainly no reason to be skeptical at this point. Like he gives you a nice run of games, you want to see him build on that, whether he trips up or not. I mean, like there are plenty of well-paid elite forwards on this team that have had the kind of games that would get someone like Nils Lundkvist scratched. But I'm
Yeah.
sorry, man. Like it's just with two full years of this. I'm not about to claim mission accomplished just yet.
Yeah. Yep. I could see that. William says another fun night. Can we give Ben love on his role changing his decade plus on the team? I think David has just said that, predicted your tweet was coming and talked about that. Crow Wi-Fi. I'll say it again. Esa Lindell is a beast. Happy Frosties. I mean, he's getting his stick taps and he deserves it. So Crow Wi-Fi also adds, I'm getting motion sickness. The main camera may have a loose screw. Regarding the broadcast of tonight. Yeah, I think it was certainly, let's just say, different. And hopefully they can make some adjustments regarding that in Utah. I believe there's one more trip to the Beehive State, and that will be it for the year as far as going to Utah for the Stars. And that actually happens in a couple of weeks. So both away visits to Utah will happen in December.
By the way, what is this reference? I don't get what's going on. Utah camera. What's?
It was just I saw it more at the beginning of the game. I don't know why, but the angles, I think, just made it a tougher watch than in other arenas. I
Oh,
definitely
okay.
noticed a difference. And like you said, maybe it's the hockey nerd in me, and maybe it's the broadcaster in me that I look at the angles and I look at the like various things. Like I'm an audio nerd. So I look at that stuff and listen with my ears. So I just,
I,
for some reason, it was just off tonight.
I do wonder about sort of like the kind of turnaround for Utah in terms of maybe like personnel or like operations behind closed doors
Yeah.
that like perhaps couldn't make the jump, because I was thinking about this just the other day. If you go to Utah's their website, they actually don't have a stats page for their roster, like something that every other roster has. And I realize, the NHL like hates analytics and doesn't want to like do a good job of them. Feels like fans don't care, but every single like I mean, like I would assume in all sports have a page where you can click and see how many points the players have for the
Yeah.
team
Yeah.
for which we track points on. So
Yeah.
that is really strange, but there you go, like another example. So if they're giving you if they're filling your bloodstream with like LSD like through the camera, as crazy as that sounds, I wouldn't like absolutely be surprised because they don't have a stats page.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, let's do a quick look ahead to LA. Kind of a late start for Stars fans on Wednesday evening. The cool part of that is that Stars fans will be able to witness all of the Four Nation Cup teams being announced and the rosters and the chatter about that, and then we get to watch a hockey game between two good teams, and the Kings and the Stars. So. Every single time it's played, and Ralph Strangis will join me tomorrow, and I was going to ask him this question, but I will ask you, David. There are players throughout the league that when you play them, you think about. The one that comes to mind is Sebastian Aho of Carolina, that I think if he played in a different city, he would get his due a little bit more. To me, the other one that comes to mind that just does it year after year is Ante Kopitar, and what a special two-way player he is. So I'm excited to see him on Wednesday night. I've always loved his game. Love that he's played in LA his whole career. He's got Stanley Cups. To me, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. But it's amazing that like we don't really talk about him as far as in the hockey circles, as far as like an elite player that you have to see.
I mean, I'm right there. I mean, I'm right there with you. Kopitar is definitely that guy. Has always been a kind of unique contradiction of this sort of blue collar kind of defensive, like assertive game, and yet he's still able to produce like a sort of top six forward, which is
Yeah.
really impressive. And yeah, I always had kind of like a thing for those LA teams. They weren't always the most exciting to watch, but like Kopitar in his prime, like Downey in his prime, like they were a really cool squad. By the way, a player that is absolutely going to be on everyone's radar if they haven't seen him is Brant Clark. I think one of the reasons why LA has been able to kind of, just play, reasonably well in Doughty's absence is that, well, they have another top pairing right shot defenseman in Brant Clark, who should have been on this freaking roster last year, probably even the year before. But fantastic young defenseman, and yeah.
So a couple of things. What did I have it? I had it under Kopitar. Anze Kopitar, 37 years old, 25 games played this year, 29 points, 8 goals, 21 assists, plus 10 on the ice if you still follow plus minus. We are 2 games away from 1,400 games played by Kopitar in the NHL. Clearly, he's going to make it to the 1,500 mark, 1,240 points. And as David and I mentioned, just defensively and on the draw, how good he has been for his career. This is a guy that started in 2006, 2007, and it wasn't like he eased into the NHL. 72 games played in his first season with the Kings back in 2006, 2007, 61 points. So just another day at the office. And like I said, if you get a moment, and that's a great pull to you that you mentioned as far as Clark too. So I'm glad you mentioned that. As far as the standings, the Kings sit in second in the Pacific. So as I mentioned, they're a good little team that, we don't see that often, even though they are in the same conference, but we don't necessarily talk about them. But you could see a potential playoff matchup here.
Well, I think it also kind of helps that, excuse me, I think it also helps that they are not saddled with an albatross contract like Pierre-Luc Dubois. It's amazing what the concept of addition by subtraction can kind of do for a team.
Yeah.
But also, they've kind of, I'm not even sure that, and I was like a big fan of LA last year. I think in part because they had some great underlying numbers, and then they just kind of cratered and eventually, just got ousted in the first round. They're always losing to Edmonton in the first round of the playoffs. But I think what kind of really helps is that, they have a really strong blue line, and then they have a lot of, even though they're not a like dangerous offensive team, like some really solid depth, in terms of, young players like, Alex Lafreniere, and then and even Alex Turcotte, right? Fifth round, fifth overall from, what was it, 2019, 2020, whatever. Everyone thought he was a bust, and he might still be a bust, but it's great to see him in an everyday NHL lineup. He's on the bottom 6, and I mean, if players like that really kind of start finding their stride, in addition to Quentin Byfield kind of going up a gear because we know he has that level, they're definitely a team that can maybe even like unseat one of the typical powerhouses in the Pacific like an Edmonton or Vegas.
So it's also interesting as we talk about Wednesday's game, when we look at the Kings, we talk about the trade that was made between them and Minnesota, and Brock Faber being a terrific defenseman. But we sometimes forget and don't talk about the other side, David. And Kevin Fiala, since that trade, has been very, very good for the Kings. So it's not like the Kings got fleeced on that. You look after the trade, 69 games in 22-23, 72 points. Then he answered with a 73-point year last year, 29 goals, 44 assists. And this year in 24 games, he has 16 points. So, once again, on a really nice pace. He's a good player. And yes, Brock Faber is a terrific defenseman for the Minnesota Wild, but the Kings actually made out pretty good in that deal.
Yeah, no, it reminds me back to Bill Zito. I don't know if you ever saw that interview with Bill Zito where they kind of talked about, sort of the nature of trades and how sometimes you have to, as kind of silly as it sounds, like lose a trade in order to win a trade. And you gave that analogy of, you and your friends, going to, the snowy mountains on an awesome ski trip, but you don't have the cars to get there, so you trade in your, brilliant, like super expensive sports car for, the trucks that'll get you, up the mountain. And, as long as you have your weekend, that's the important thing, was Bill Zito's quote. As long as you have your weekend. And so I think that's kind of a good example, right? It's like we all want to kind of believe that, our prospects are going to, develop into exactly who we thought they were, that top pairing defenseman or that top six forward. And they don't always. And even if they do, as long as you get something of value, you can always kind of, sort of mold that value into what you need it to be. And so, yeah, like I'm sure like LA, looks back and thinks, man, that's pretty tough. But look at their right side defense, like Mikey Anderson, Brant Clark. This is not even counting Drew Doughty and Jordan Spence, right? So it's not like Brock Faber was ever going to get the same opportunity on the right side in LA that he got in Minnesota.
Yeah, great point. Just to plug fellow Spits and Suds and Gavin, David, friend, Robert Tiffin with a recap of tonight's games on starsthoughts.com. David, let's focus on you. Anything coming up in D Magazine or on your Substack?
Yes, so tomorrow I'm going to have a report for all the the main prospects: Liam Bichel, Emil Hemming, and Tony Strangis. I have a little mixtape for Justin Ritzkovian, for those that haven't seen a whole lot of them. And then also later this week for D Magazine, I will be talking about Logan Stankoven and the Calder race. So I'm going to follow that Wednesday, maybe goes up Thursday, possibly Friday, but a lot of stuff coming up.
Awesome to hear. And that Substack, by the way, to subscribe, and it is certainly a very nice gift to yourself around this holiday season, is Stars Stack. That's where you can find David Castillo. You can also find him on Twitter at David Castillo. My friend, thank you so much for joining us on this post game. Good to have you back in the win column.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm no longer the unlucky rabbit's foot that I've been. And glad to see that you came into this awake.
A poke at having a day job, yes. It does wear me out doing
I wasn't supposed to say that. Oh, my bad.
No. I mean, I hit rewind on Victory Plus, so I'm okay. But yes. So if there is a Christmas gift, what's that?
We love you, Gavin.
Well, I love you back. I will say, David, if there is a Christmas gift that I can be given this year, it is that Victory Plus on Samsung TVs will happen, because I should go out and just buy another Roku, but my current setup is in the bedroom, and watching and tracking hockey games lying on your bed is not the perfect equation when you've worked a 12 to 13 hour day. So
that puts a lot into perspective, man. I appreciate
it. No, it's okay. But yes, you are the man, my friend, and we will talk to you soon. Always love having you on the post game, especially after victories.
Thank you.
Such an awkward dismount. Oh my goodness.
Sorry, I thought you were like gonna wrap it up, and so I like muted myself, and I'm like, oh wait, we're still
such an awkward dismount.
Okay. Listen, it's gonna be awkward as long as you don't go see Gladiator 2 with me. As long
I know.
Then it's gonna be awkward.
We do. We have to go see
the
Gladiator.
Love's not gonna be there 100%. It's gonna be there 90%.
Yes. Tomorrow on Spits and Suds, the greatness of Ralph Strangis will join us, which means I will get in 2 words on the podcast, but it's always great to have Ralphie on the program, and really excited. He's the man. And in fact, David Castillo has done a lot of work with Ralph Strangis as well. So great to get Ralph's thoughts on the days of old, and we'll also talk about this current Stars team. So that'll be coming out tomorrow afternoon right here on Spits and Suds on Odyssey and wherever your favorite podcasts are found. For David Castillo, I'm Gavin Spittle. We'll talk to you soon on Spits and Suds. Have a great day, everyone.